you send me an email with buying intent, then wouldn't it be great if that just surfaced up so that on my mobile device or when I go to your record, it just came front and center to say, hey, Mario just did this. So we think you should be focusing your time and energy.
Hey y'all, welcome to Selling with Social, the podcast that helps marketers increase marketing qualified leads, sales reps to shatter sales results, and sales leaders to grow as leaders. Each show, we interview sales, marketing, and social media practitioners, leaders, and influencers to help you connect, close more deals, build stronger relationships with clients, and improve your sales productivity. I'm Mario Martinez Jr. You're now listening to Selling with Social. Welcome, Brian Galicia from Microsoft. I'm so excited, my friend. Thank you very much for joining me on Selling with Social.
Hey, Mario. Well, thank you for having me. It was fantastic. When I got your email via LinkedIn, I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool because I've heard your name. We had that dialogue where we had a common connection at Sales Connect several years ago. And so it's great to be reconnected on this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited that you're here with me, and we've got some great content that we're going to be talking about today, especially understanding and learning about Microsoft and how sales has evolved and understanding buyer's intent and some of the things that you guys are doing in terms of launching and rolling out extensively the use of social selling throughout your entire sales process. So I'm so excited, my friend. Thank you very much. But before we get started, what I'd love for people to do is understand who Brian Galicia is. Do me a favor, just tell us about you.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to, Mario. So thanks again for having me. I've been at Microsoft for 11 years, but I've been in kind of the selling profession for 20 plus years, kind of unfortunately dating myself. But I've had pre-sales roles, I've had sales leader roles, I've been an individual seller, held quotas. And so fantastic, the opportunity to kind of share a point of view that I have. And one of the things that, of course, now that I'm also accountable for the work we're doing with LinkedIn and Sales Navigator within Microsoft, I've taken a page out of their playbook, which is what would I say that doesn't exist on my LinkedIn profile? So I think one interesting tidbit that I have is the fact that I've actually been on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, if you could believe that. Not the full-on ABC, whatever channel that was, not that full-on thing, but I was actually in Orlando at a conference. And we had a break in the day, so I figured I'd sneak out to Magic Kingdom and just kind of take the sightseeing. I'm a huge Disney fan, happiest place on earth. And lo and behold, I walk in, I'm like, oh, they have a Disney version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So I walked in the stage room and exact same setup, totally looks exactly like it on the show. And you get in and you have to fat finger really quickly, the things in order. And I just randomly guessed, and guess what? I actually was the fastest person to get it. And so that was a fun story. I got to the $32,000 question and nice. I lost. I was looking for the grand prize. The grand prize was a cruise, a Disney cruise, all expenses paid. I didn't get to that point, but I did get some cool swag and some pins to say that I was on the show and that I got to the $32,000 question. So that was a fun experience.
I like it. Well, you stole my thunder by asking, tell us one thing that nobody would know by looking at your personal profile. And there you go. I have not had anybody do Who Wants to Be a Millionaire yet.
Oh, there you go. I'm the first.
I like it. Fantastic. So in your current role now at Microsoft, you're the worldwide sales leader of Salesforce Automation and LinkedIn. Tell me, what the heck does that mean?
Yeah, it's a mouthful. I mean, I'm like, what do I provide? So I think I'm accountable for ensuring that when we have conversations with possible customers or existing Microsoft customers, they fully understand the value proposition that we as Microsoft are providing as it relates to the selling profession. How do we enable a seller to do their very best? But at the end of the day, it's not just about the seller, it's about the end result. It's about the outcome. How is a company able to transform? What we like to do is, how do we digitally transform organizations? How do we empower employees? How do we empower companies to drive the best customer engagement? And a lot of it starts at the very beginning, marketing and sales. When you have a seller who is reaching out, trying to build relationships, trying to uncover net new opportunities, potentially upsell opportunities, making sure that we have a holistic approach across all the Microsoft assets to be able to do that. So now that LinkedIn is part of Microsoft, when Microsoft acquired LinkedIn back in December of last year, that created a whole new set of opportunities for us to, as we'll talk about in this podcast, the value that now LinkedIn provides and the holistic story that we can deliver as an end result to customers and the value that brings to customers.
Yeah, well, clearly the Microsoft acquisition of LinkedIn came as a surprise to pretty much everyone. Like nobody really thought and saw, oh, wow, this is a great match. This is a great marriage. And there's a reason why Microsoft wanted that. We don't want to rehash all the things that have happened over the last year, but in a nutshell, why is LinkedIn so valuable to a company like Microsoft?
Yeah, and thanks for asking, Mario. I think the biggest thing is the value it brings is LinkedIn has almost, or probably over 500 million members, what they call members, profiles that exist like you, me, and people are listening to that podcast. That information is so valuable because if you put that into what we refer to as the graph, the kind of the data graph, whether it be, imagine it's content. It's content that's coming from LinkedIn. It's content coming from a business application like Dynamics and CRM or ERP. It's coming from your productivity tools like Office and Yammer and Skype. Imagine if we can blur all those things together and be able to take action so that moving forward, when someone goes into a record or starts engaging with a customer, you can pull all this information in there without having to go to multiple sources. It's not data siloed, but also with all the things we're doing with machine learning and artificial intelligence, be able to proactively tell a person, here's the relationship health, or here's the next best action you need to take. And what better source when you think about business professionals to then start integrating that into the broader Microsoft portfolio, not just with business applications, but earlier this week, we actually announced we had a couple of user conferences in Orlando called Microsoft Ignite and Envision. And we actually talked about how LinkedIn now shows up very simply. Imagine you send me an email, Mario. Wouldn't it be great if I just had your LinkedIn profile show up on the contact record in my Outlook box? So that now starts to exist, and those will continue to innovate on those things. So in a nutshell, it really provides us the ability to take all the best things that LinkedIn provides across all their assets and then tie it into the broader portfolio of all the great things that we do at Microsoft.
So we think about this from a seller's perspective. You have Microsoft now has this massive database. And for people who are actually active on LinkedIn, whether or not they are actually actively posting anything, or you are actually actively engaging or even researching or even passively looking at various different pieces of data, you've got this powerful giant database that actually, when combined with some tools like even Microsoft Dynamics, right? When you combine with the CRM model, it allows, correct me if I'm wrong, but it allows salespeople to really start evolving their sales behavior. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I think a good way to think about it is LinkedIn has all these great, if someone's updating their profile, the first thing is untapping the relationships that exist there. And so when we think about the viewpoint we have as we talk about kind of how selling has changed, when you think about sellers and their engagement with selling to customers, it really starts at the heart as relationships. And so if you have a strong relationship with a person, of course, there's a high probability because you trust them, they're adding value, they're going to buy from you. And so you imagine LinkedIn and that value, like the connection of the 3 degrees separation of Kevin Bacon, that value of getting that insight of knowing who knows who. And I'll just give you a good example. At Microsoft, we now have over 100,000 employees if you include LinkedIn. Imagine me as a seller being able to tap the professional networks of all those employees who opt into allowing us to see their profile. But not just that, you tie that back into exactly what you talked about, matching that now into the tools I'm using. So it's not the alt-tab syndrome where a lot of us today, we have Sales Navigator open, we have potentially our productivity tool open like Office, and then we have our business application tool like Dynamics 365 open, all silos of information. What if we could actually go into a record, open up Mario's, let's say, contact record in Dynamics, and then it shows a window into all the information that I can glean from Sales Navigator. That's where the beauty of, again, how we're enabling a seller to just be more efficient in finding the right people to target, providing some insight and value, and then managing these complex relationships that all of us are faced with because there's only a certain amount of time in the day, allow us to be productive so that we're getting something. It's not the system of oppression of putting data in, like all of us have been professional sellers. What seller wants to put data in CRM? No one does. But if you give it a carrot to say, if you put stuff in here, it's going to benefit you, but you're going to get something back. When you go into that experience, there's going to be information in there that's going to lock for you that allows you to have, again, a stronger engagement with your customers because you know who to target, when to talk to them, who to talk to, who to potentially leverage and tap a relationship with to get into a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're preaching the same message, of course, right? In terms of leveraging tools like LinkedIn and integrating that into your CRM. That is the age, that is the wave that we're in. And unfortunately, our customers are demanding of us modernization, if you would, of our sales tactics. So I want to kind of switch because you and I had some great dialogue around how selling has evolved. And I'd love to get your perspective, Microsoft's perspective on the modern seller. And I have a saying, as you know, the modern buyer requires a modern seller, right?
Yeah.
And particularly because selling has evolved, period, end of discussion. It's so different. Rewind 5 years ago. The tactics and the methodology that you used 5 years ago are not all the same ones that you're using today. So talk a little bit about that, Brian, from Microsoft's perspective, from your perspective. How has selling changed? And also, I think you kind of have a personal journey, if you would, that takes you through answering the question of how selling has evolved.
Yeah, no, you're spot on, Mario. I think there was an article done by a Forrester a couple years ago that basically said, what's the anatomy of a business-to-business decision maker? Exactly to your point. I mean, selling as itself, like everyone sells, but the way that buyers are so informed because of the ability to access information at a moment's notice. I mean, my kids can look up something so quickly on my phone in a moment's notice and get research, understand a whole bunch of things about whatever without having to pick up a phone to talk to someone. That's a huge transformation because a buyer, exactly to your point, a buyer is more informed. And so what are they doing? Well, they're researching things. They're using your website. They're using LinkedIn. Like I have not met a buyer yet that when they start engaging with a seller, they don't look at their profile. And what does your profile say about you? So those are the types of things as you think about the involvement of sales, it really becomes this digital transformation to where, how are you as a seller being perceived? One, like what does your brand look like when someone just goes to your profile? What do they see? Do they see that, oh, I'm looking for a job? Or they see, oh, this is someone that knows a lot about digital transformation that can potentially help me with what I'm trying to solve, a problem I'm trying to solve. So then it takes us to, okay, what's changed? Well, I think the biggest thing, there's all these studies now that say that buyers think that their reps don't know anything, which of course, as a seller, I mean, sometimes sellers give us, I mean, the challenge is we all get faced with being sold to. And so I think when we're professional sellers, we always think, oh, that's not me. But again, leading into my seller's journey, I think when I first started out, I was kind of like, why wouldn't someone call me back? Like, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm a nice guy. I think I have a compelling message that's short and sweet. Like, why am I not getting that phone call back? Well, a lot of it is like, we're all busy. And imagine a decision maker getting that phone call 100 different times throughout the day or throughout a week or throughout a month. And so why does someone pick up the phone for one person and doesn't pick up the phone for something else? I think it's twofold. One, it's the relationship. We truly believe that if you can get introduced to someone because you have that trusted relationship, that will elevate that conversation because you're most likely going to take a conversation, take an email, take a whatever, because you trust that person to say, hey, I'd like you to meet this person because I think you may get value from it. Granted, it's still up to us as sellers to create some value there, but they're likely to take that call. Two is, are you bringing value at the time that you're reaching out to them? And so as a seller, it's really tough because we're so focused on quotas. We're measured on a quarterly basis and a fiscal year. So we're like trying to churn the crank of like, okay, who do I think is going to buy? What I found is that if you take it around and you focus on, okay, ultimately, you may not be able to sell something at that time, but if you start building the relationship, building the conversation, building value, I found more often than not that when you see that conversation 6 months, 8 months, a year from now, people may not like me saying that, but as a seller, you kind of always have to take the long-term approach. You have to say, am I adding value at the time? And someone may not be able to buy right now, but lo and behold, you're seeding that conversation so that when they are ready to buy and you've offered value, guess what? You're going to be on their speed dial. You're going to be the first person or the first couple of people that they're going to reach back out to. So hopefully that helped to grow. I mean, that's not just Brian's viewpoint. I mean, I think that's what we think about Microsoft too, is taking the approach of how do we enable sellers to just provide a better way of engaging with their customers, not just relationships, but providing a set of information all in one location to, again, enable them to focus their time and energy on the right things.
Yeah. Well, you hit a couple of relevant points that, Vengreso, we talk about all the time. Branding, relationships when, are you bringing value? And no now doesn't mean no ever, right?
That's right.
So we talk about this on the topic of branding. I love it when I go to a sales rep's profile, especially with an organization that says, oh, yeah, we're using LinkedIn. Oh, yeah, we're using social selling. Oh, yeah, we've got that digital thing dialed in. And then we go, what's your top producing or what's your worst producing sales rep? And we look at their profiles and it's quota crushing sales rep.
That's right.
It is number one earner in all the company, best negotiator.
Yeah. That's right.
Right. And you look at this and you're like, so how many times have you bought from a salesperson that you didn't actually look them up? And the leader usually says, well, I always look them up. Right. So you think your buyers aren't looking up your salespeople, and as a direct result, they're seeing best contract negotiator. No buyer wants to see the best contract negotiator out there. They'd rather deal with the worst one, right?
That's right. They want to get the best deal. No, exactly.
They want to get the best deal. Exactly. Yeah. They don't want to see quota crushing sales rep. They don't want to see 100% club 25 years in a row, right? They only care about that after they've determined whether or not you can solve a business problem, which leads you to the other discussion you talked about, which is, are you bringing value, right? And the value statements are, I find this to be a big challenge, especially in a lot of organizations that measure productivity. How many calls did you make? How many emails did you send out? How many dials did you make, right? Because how is it that you can bring value by understanding? In the old days when I was learning how to sell, I had an old mentor, his name was Greg Wolf. And Greg taught me, before you pick up the phone, you read the 10K, you read the annual reports, right? Or you skim through it and hear the areas you want to look through. Understand what are the pressing issues for the company. Nowadays, that's available online anywhere. Just go to Google and you can Google anything, right? But the value was important to understand what was important to the company, what was important to the business, what was important to the individual. And I believe that majority of the time, you can find out what's important to the individual. But let's pretend that someone is not active on social and you can't figure that out through groups or whatever it might be. You can go up one level and say what's important to the company.
That's right.
And translate that back into a business problem. And that's the power, I think, that really the Microsoft and LinkedIn relationship brings to the table, is that you have the ability to bring in what's important to the individual and still store content related to Microsoft, the CRM application, and what's important to the business or to the company or to the industry. Does that make sense?
Totally does. I mean, you're spot on. I think when you lay that on top of then the productivity tool, like when you're trying to solve a business problem, it's a team sport. You don't necessarily just rely on your selling team. You rely on R&D, you rely on marketing, product management, finance, the CEO of a company. Well, how do you do that? Well, you need productivity tools. You need things for collaboration. You need things for what we're doing right now, like podcasting or webcasts or screen sharing. All those things coming together. And then again, that brings us, that's why we believe at Microsoft, we're trying to bring a unique value proposition, because it's not one thing or this thing or this thing. And it's exactly your point. LinkedIn solves a really unique challenge that a lot of sellers want to do, but it can't just be standalone. It is all these other tools that a seller or someone in an organization would use that then helps them holistically throughout that journey. And exactly to your point, it's not just about LinkedIn too. It's other social areas where, like you said, 10K. What I've viewed, and a lot of my sellers do as well, is we also mine what's happening on social channels. Like a best thing that I always tell sellers is just go to if they have a social profile, whether it be on Facebook or Twitter as an example, you'll learn a lot just by what they're responding to on Twitter, because you'll understand maybe what's top of mind. What are maybe their customers saying about them? What are people saying about their brand, that you can determine, are they able to react to those situations very quickly? Because you don't want to have a situation like United Airlines, that whole situation, someone getting pulled off and then that goes viral and that makes your brand look bad. Those are the types of things you can utilize to mine, again, all these different sources of information. So as a seller, you're being very informed so that when you come to a customer, you're giving them, exactly to your point, you're giving them value of something where, hey, you've done your research, but you're not just going in to sell them something. You're going in because you're looking for an outcome. You think that you can solve a business outcome for them, and you're providing that solution.
Yeah, I love what you just said there. Going back to something you said a little bit earlier was about relationships win. And you talked about the introductions and the warm introductions. And this is something that's very powerful within LinkedIn, of course, that you can leverage. But I just got through with a training that we gave. And people always ask me, like, when you start out with learning how to connect with somebody, what do you teach them? And I could teach you all day long how to go through and run filters and be able to connect with people and send out automated messages, and even do a 3x3, 3 things in 3 minutes to be able to connect them. But the first thing that we teach is how to leverage the warm introduction. Because here's the reality. Even though times have changed, where we go and grab content from, where we go and look for content, and how we engage with buyers is different, or how the buyers are expecting us to engage, nothing has changed in way of, and selling, in way of getting a warm introduction. 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, when you asked Billy to introduce you to Johnny, that still got you the appointment.
That's right.
Today, when you ask Billy to introduce you to Johnny, the warm introduction still gets you the appointment, right?
That's right.
In most cases.
That's right.
So can you touch a little bit about the science? Is this important to Microsoft? Are you guys leveraging this? And how can a small company as well as a big company, like with Microsoft, you've got, how many employees are there?
Yeah, over 100,000.
100,000 plus employees.
Yeah.
So the odds of being able to find something you're connected to that can give you a warm introduction is big. But what about the medium-sized companies? What about the small-sized companies? Can you still get that advantage? And do you agree that warm relationships and warm intros are of value to a sales organization?
Oh yeah. I mean, by far, I just think about my own person, and even outside of Microsoft, I think about the success when I rewind back. What have been my best sales engagements with customers and what have been my worst? Well, the worst ones were ones where I wasn't very well prepped. I just tried to randomly call someone, and guess what? The outcome was terrible. Versus I had a warm introduction. I was very prepared before I even get that introduction, before I use that bullet for that leverage, because that person, if I don't know that person really well, so I'll give you an example, because we have over 100,000 employees at Microsoft, my superpower would be that I know all those people. I don't. There's no way I could. But we share a common connection at Microsoft. So you can imagine, they see me, it's like, ooh, Brian, a seller. Ooh, do I want to make that introduction to someone I know really well and jeopardize my own relationship with them? And so the thing that I do is be very crisp as to why I'm trying to get that engagement and help that person making the introduction not have to think about it, because they're doing us a favor. They're doing us a favor of being able to reach out. So let's make their job easy. Let's make it, what I like to say, frictionless. I like the term frictionless. Make it a super frictionless experience so it can be turnkey. A, yes, here's why I'm trying to reach out to someone you know really well. Two, here's the content I want you to send, which is kind of probably what you provide in your services, but it's very concise. It's not this long-winded dissertation of War and Peace. Very concise as to why I'm trying to relate to them, and really key important, what's the outcome that I want them to drive? Meaning that it can't just be, okay, hey, thanks for the introduction. Open to a meeting. Could you take a coffee with them? Something that says, okay, here's why they want to talk to you, but here's what I want to drive. And that's so important. And then if I'm a small business, I didn't have the advantage of all those connections, then Team Link may not be as beneficial, because if you're a 5-person company, okay, well, that portion may not be as valuable, but there's other things you can be doing to leverage relationships. I'll give you a good example. With Sales Navigator example, I can go in and see who are the other like people at that organization that I should be contacting based upon, let's say they follow my company, or let's say they have these commonalities, or they have these certain types of things that set on their profile, or maybe they went to the same school. I don't know them, but you can use those indicators to, again, be warm and introducing, but not be creepy, but be in a way to have that strong connection and then offer some type of value. Because if they're hidden, if they don't post anything online, it's exactly to your point, Mario, finding something in their industry, finding something that is about their company, or just something in general that is relatable to them, that you can give a point of view to where, hey, we don't know each other. We share some commonalities. You work at this industry where we've seen a ton of success in doing these types of things. So it's telling personal stories of where you've seen that success, being very concise and saying, if this is something top of mind for you that you're trying to address, I would love to help you. And next action would be, would you be open to connecting? That's what I found always successful. Open to connecting maybe next week, or open connecting over lunch, or something as an outcome that helps get that connection.
We talked just for the last few minutes about providing something of value and trying to get that appointment. But the flip side is also understanding buyer's intent, right? And if you could understand buyer's intent, it could help make these conversations a lot warmer and a lot easier. But it's sometimes hard to figure out buyer's intent. And without the right tools and the technology, and I want to touch on that. You guys, when I say you guys, I'm talking about Microsoft. Help me understand, how is Microsoft, or how does Microsoft understand buying intent?
Yep. So I think at a very high level, I mentioned kind of the data graph, because we now have the asset of LinkedIn. There's all this information we can mine and store, again, maintaining privacy and all those types of things. But to understand, let's say you send me an email with some type of wording that says, hey, Brian, this was a great podcast. I want to learn more. Just the fact that the wording in there showed that, this person wants to do more. It's kind of that sentiment where you're trying to track, okay, is this a trending good conversation or bad? That is somewhat good, because they're saying they want something. And by our machine learning, we have thousands and thousands of data scientists at Microsoft. They're trying to make it so easy for an organization to where, because I've gotten questions from customers like, Brian, do I need to hire data scientists? Well, you can if you want to, depending on what your scenario is. But we as Microsoft, our point of view is we want to put that ownership on us to give you the solution, the technology, if that's important to you, to allow you to just have the information tell you that. So if you send me an email, going back to that example, if you send me an email with buying intent, then wouldn't it be great if that just surfaced up so that on my mobile device, or when I go to your record, it just came front and center to say, hey, Mario just did this. So we think you should be focusing your time and energy. We know that you're so busy that you have, let's say, 500 opportunities in your pipeline. What if this one opportunity had buying intent and it flagged it for you? So you can say, okay, out of my day, here's the 5 opportunities I should be focusing on because of some type of interaction, whether it be they clicked on something, they sent you an email, or maybe because of all these other decision things that they've been doing in your organization that then targets them to say, wow, we think this person is more apt to having a conversation about this because of all these things that have been happening. And that's a unique thing with Microsoft because, again, there's so many technologies and capabilities, and I don't want to go through all the products and all that stuff, but there's a whole bunch of things we've been doing that allows us to do that because of the horsepower of the broad Microsoft platform across all our product portfolios that allows us to get all these rich information across our different products.
Now, how is that different, sales versus marketing, right? In theory, marketing through robust marketing automation tools that are out there, you pick one, I don't care what one it is, but let's just say the Marketos of the world and some of these other tools that are out there, they're scoring leads. I open up an email, I click on the actual link that's inside the email. I download the white paper. It serves me up some information inside supposedly my CRM system. So how is what you're describing about understanding buyer's intent, leveraging artificial intelligence of what Microsoft is doing, how is that different than what marketing should already be doing for me anyways?
Yeah, I think marketing is just one source of the truth because exactly to your point, Mario, if I was using Marketo or Adobe or, you name the flavor of a marketing automation tool, that's doing a lot of things up front in the initial buying cycle, whether you invite someone to a webcast or you send them an email or they attended a trade show. But there are all these other things that come into play too. What happens when they buy something? And let's say the customer support, they have X number of support cases opened up, or they just had no activity because the fact that you sold them something, but then let's say the usage of the solution that we're selling has gone down, meaning that like no one's logged in or their database of usage hasn't gone up. All those things aren't necessarily marketing things. There are just signals in various different areas, including legacy applications. You think about ERP and you think, Brian, well, what are we learning from ERP? Well, we're learning about buying behavior. Someone orders something and they do these things. Well, what if we can then mix and match that stuff so that we understand for this type of company that's in this industry that has bought this specific thing, here's how they configured it. What if we could take all those things and marketing from all these different sources and then come up with a algorithm that says, again, it's always trying to figure out what is the question you're trying to answer. So if the question you're trying to answer is relationship health or the fact that who am I supposed to target next, the data that it's being sourced from might prioritize something else or another. But our viewpoint is, wouldn't it be great if you could just mine all that data from all these different sources so that you get a holistic view of the bigger picture? Because marketing in general is just one piece of it, but there's all these other things we're finding that customers want to do to, again, determine the health of that engagement so that a seller, in this case, a seller can then know where to focus their time and energy because they're getting this rich insight across the fact that there's been no activity or the fact that someone sent an email with some type of buying signal or the fact that, very simply, I have my phone out and I'm in Portland, Oregon right now, and it realizes, oh, Brian's in Portland. Here's his calendar. There's another company that's in his vicinity that just requested some information. What if I prioritize my time to say, hey, Brian, by the way, you may not realize this. There's a company in your area because you're there already. Why don't you make a call to see if they're open for a connection point because they just signed up for whatever. They hit a certain threshold that alluded to the fact that we think they're interested in having a conversation. Those are the types of things I think is pretty powerful when you can do it all right. We haven't solved all these scenarios, but these are things that we as Microsoft are thinking about. Some of these are you can do today. Some of them are ones that we're trying to get to because now we have all this great information and it's now what can we do with it? What type of information can we glean and provide real-time action for a seller? Because the seller doesn't want to sift through all this stuff. They want to say, okay, if I'm in context of something I'm doing, give me what I need to know. Just put it in front of me. And so I can do it. Not go to this tool, go to this tool, go to this tool, put your tea leaves out, figure out what you need to do. And then now you have to, and then you just wasted an hour trying to figure out what to do versus go into something that tells you exactly, Mario, go do this because we think the things you need to be doing.
Well, I won't name names with the company nor with the tool, but this was a mainstream company and a mainstream marketing automation tool that had integration into our CRM application. But whenever we got served up a hot lead, you try to figure out, okay, why is this a hot lead, right? Marketing just all of a sudden took the contact that was inside of our database and now it served me up because it hit a certain point value. And that point value came over and is now a hot lead. So you go into the CRM record, you open it up, and you look at the log to see why is this a hot lead? And then it would show you like this long list of all the things that this person may have done. And you've got all these specialized codes. codes that marketing's putting in that understands the marketing world understands now our marketing department, but not your salesperson. Like I didn't understand that they clicked on KWP 907240. What the heck does that mean?
Exactly.
What is? Yeah, show me what it is. And by the way, when you go to click on it inside your Salesforce integration or your CRM integration, and you click on that link, and you're like, well, what was the document that they looked at? Well, with that you have to ask marketing. Are you kidding me? Right? Like understanding this at a salesperson level. And this is where we need our marketing teams. We need the alignment between sales and marketing without a doubt. But we need marketing speaking the salesperson language. And we need salespeople to step up and understand what marketers are trying to do to help bridge this gap,
That's
right? And I think that's very, very important. But talk about things related to like Cantana in Dynamics, relationship cards in Dynamics. Are these things related at all to understanding buying engagement or buyer's intent?
It is, yeah, because it all is about the aspect of knowing what's happening in the system and then giving an awareness to go do something. So when you think about Cortana, I'll just give you a simple example just so you can kind of glean the thought. And I think we talked about this in a prior call, is we've all gotten those alerts where we're sitting in a meeting and we have to leave for an airport at a certain time. Otherwise, we're going to miss our flight. Right. Of course, with machine learning and Cortana as a digital assistant as an example, it knows, hey, Brian's sitting in this office in this location. It knows that your flight leaves at this time. It also knows the fact that to go from this distance to this distance, it takes this long. And by the way, there's a major accident that just occurred. So if you don't leave now, you're probably going to miss your flight. So that's just one example. But when you put it in the context of, again, we're talking about business applications, how it helps the seller, the idea of a relationship card, just as an example, it can come up. We've coined the term relationship assistant. What if you can go into, well, it's very simply, go in a dashboard for the day and say, you know how in the past with business application tools or CRM tools, you had a task list that said, this is due, right, this is due, this is due, this is due. And you kind of get lost in that shuffle. And it's not real time. It just tells you the fact that if you put a reminder or a workflow told you that you have to do this, you kind of did it. What if it actually was in real time based upon where you're at or what you're doing or all these things that we're talking about in layman's terms? Again, to your point of, I laugh because that was Microsoft several years ago where we would go, it was P90X, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, what was that? Oh, yeah, talk to the marketing person to tell you what that is. I'm like, I just want to know, was this marketing event on this day and this time and this location? Just give me it to layman's terms. And that's what we're trying to do too, is exactly make it super simple for us as sellers. Because I mean, kind of dumb. We just want to be able to say, just tell me up front so I can grasp it, because I have so many things in my head that I'm trying to do. Just give me what I need to do. So just very simply, it could tell you something like, there's been no layman's terms, there's been no activity with this account. And then you go into detail, and I'm just reading this verbatim because I'm just looking at our system right now. Hey, there's no activity with this account. There's been no activity with this account since Wednesday, June 7th, 2017. That's pretty straightforward. That tells me, okay, if that's something important to me, and I think that's a hot deal, well, guess what? It
may not be so hot.
It may be so hot if the system is telling me it's not going anywhere, because you can expect, like, if something is happening, you would expect engagement to be occurring, and not the fact that the seller has to put in stuff all the time. We also look at it like, what if you chose to do this, what if the information, and this is where emails and meeting requests and the stuff that happens behind the scenes with predictive tools become important, because that stuff does not exist in business applications by default. You do all those things, and again, in a Microsoft world, you do all that stuff in Office 365 or in Outlook. So what if you can just turn that on so it just reads the stuff that's sitting in your Exchange inbox that's tied to Office, takes all that information and just ties it back into who you're talking to. And it knows, because it knows, oh, Mario with this email address, with this phone number, this meeting, it ties all that together so that a seller, what we wanted to do is have the seller not have to think too much. If the seller is doing things organically as they normally do in the sales cycle, again, our viewpoint is, let's make it less frictionless. Let's try not to put all these barriers in front of them saying, this is a required field. This is a required field. I mean, we've all been in that situation where we look at CRM tools and it says, you look at a form, oh, there's 20 required fields on this form. I'm like, is that benefiting the seller? No, that's benefiting sales leaders, which is fine because that's important too. But give me something to where I can go in that record and say, hey, by the way, Mario, that exact same example. Hey, Mario has not engaged with you in the past 10 days. Okay, well, that's good to know. I might be thinking in my head, oh, I just talked to him a day ago. Oh, maybe I didn't. And then to be able to mine that level of information.
Yeah, well, and I'll give you a great example. Our systems are not paired together, but I started a conversation on LinkedIn, and that moved from a status post to a LinkedIn message. And that LinkedIn message, this executive is actually coming out to see me while I'm keynoting at an event, a sales conference in Orlando in the coming weeks. And then I moved it to email because it was easier to be able to move it to email in conversation to coordinate based upon setting up scheduling a meeting. So then I went to go find the email and I was like, crap, I can't find it. I went to go find the message I sent him and then get the phone number from the LinkedIn message. And I'm like, shoot, I don't know where it's at. So it was somewhere between the status update versus the LinkedIn message versus my email message. And none of it was consolidated into the CRM. So like, we don't want salespeople not to think. We want salespeople to think about strategically how to advance the sales opportunity, not the administrative. You know how long it took me to find the phone number? I was there for like 15 minutes trying to search for the phone number in 3 different systems. And I think that's kind of the power of Microsoft had clearly some foresight and some thought into making a $26 billion acquisition and helping to bridge this world together to help sellers, sellers.
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, just a simple example, like you sent me this email to initially create this conversation. We can't have that conversation that's happening in LinkedIn be siloed to everything else. And exactly to your point, like if I start with an email, it doesn't magically just stay there. It will transform into phone conversations, into meetings, into emails, into IM exchanges, or what you have it. It's multi-factored, multi-formed to where a phone conversation will never go away. Email conversation will go away. It's just another mode of communication that someone's comfortable with. Even a Twitter, I'll also say even a Twitter direct message. That's another good example where if you're in a type of organization that relies on that being the mode of communication, well, you have to be where your buyers are, and then how do you make, to your point, how do you make the seller really effective to where they're not having to go into 5 million different places to find information about that specific customer, that specific contact?
Yeah, love it. Well, if those that are listening in, if you wanted them to walk away with one thing from this conversation, especially as you think about this whole world of Salesforce automation and LinkedIn and your position as a worldwide sales leader over this particular thought methodology, what do you want them to walk away from this podcast?
Yeah, I think at a very high level, Mario, what I would walk away from is, again, because you think about the technology and tools, I always tell people, what business outcome are you trying to solve? Because every company out there, and I hate to say this as a seller, but every company out there wants to sell you technology because we think that we can help enable you. And I would agree with that. Technology is a great enabler, but at the end of the day, you have to make sure that your house is in order in regards to how do you want your customer journey experience to be like. So it has to start with your culture. It has to start with the business process. It has to start with how you want your sales people to interact. And then exactly to your point, Mario, I mean, marketing and sales and everyone in the organization have to be tightly aligned to how they want to engage customers and what type of content they want to send. Once you understand that and you've defined that, then solutions like at Microsoft, we think we have a pretty compelling solution because we have it under one umbrella. Not to say you have to standardize on everything, but the fact that we're constantly thinking about how to solve and empower you as an organization to do different things because we own the assets of what someone's going to be using anyway. And so I think once you think about that, if people are interested in learning more, because I think part of the challenge sometimes at Microsoft is that people view us still as, oh, you're the guys that create Office, or you're the guys that create Windows, or you're the guys that create the Xbox. But sometimes people forget that, wow, we actually have a $1 billion business in business applications as well. That's a key pillar to our whole digital transformation enablement that we can provide to customers. And so we love the opportunity if people are interested in knowing more. I'm sure Mario will put in a couple of key resources as part of this podcast. But I think the main thing, talking about Point Drive, because Point Drive is one thing that we use very heavily within Microsoft, is aka.ms/PDMRSS is a point drive that I send out to people for just people who want to learn more about this topic and the conversation that Mario was kind enough to have me on this podcast with to learn more about relationship selling.
Fantastic. Well, I always ask my guests, Brian, as we close out, your all-time favorite movie. What is it?
Oh, all-time favorite movie. Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I do have a couple, but I would say my all-time favorite movie, it has to be Star Wars. Probably people have said that before. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. So I guess that the only exception is Star Wars Episode 1, the actual episode, not 4, like 4, 5, 6, and then it went back to 1. 1 was, not the best. Like I can watch Episode 4, the very first one that was it 1977 when it was released when I was a couple years old, just a baby. I mean, I can watch that all day long. And I'm super excited because, as everyone knows, if you're a Star Wars fan, hey, what was it? Episode 8 is actually coming out in December. So I won't be hanging out like some of the diehard people, like 24 hours in advance camping out. I'm not doing that, but I'll definitely be in line to be watching that. So yeah, Star Wars has to be my favorite movie.
I was going to say, so you'll have your tent out, your tent pitched the night before, huh?
No, not that, but I will have my lightsaber. People who know me, they're like, "Oh, Brian, you actually have a real life lightsaber." I'm like, I do. I actually have a couple. I have a Darth Vader one, and then Luke Skywalker. I have a blue one and a red one. So yeah,
that's hilarious.
Yeah. For
fantastic. Well, I think this was a great. Yeah, it's great for the podcast there. Yeah, this was a great conversation, Brian. I appreciate you taking the time, especially to talk about, from Microsoft's perspective, where the world of digital sales is going and how you guys are leveraging it. So I want to thank you for joining me here on Selling with Social, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mario. Take care.
And we'll make sure we put all of the links to some of the sites that Brian referenced and some of the tools. They'll be in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on Selling with Social. Thanks so much for joining me on that episode of Selling with Social. I hope you found as much value in that episode as I did. Here's what I want you to do next. Please go to www.vengreso.com. That's VENGRESO.com. VENGRESO.com. And make sure that you get access to our content. We've got the latest and greatest in digital sales, sales training, content marketing, and social selling strategies that are going to help you grow your sales pipeline. I look forward to having you on the next show of Selling with Social. Make sure you also go to vengreso.com/podcast to be able to get access to the latest and greatest Selling with Social episodes, along with any of the other episodes that we've got from Social Business Engines with my friend and partner, Bernie Borges, along with Conversations with Phil with my friend and partner, Phil Gerbishak. Thanks again for joining on Selling with Social.